Hey there, once more welcome, or hopefully welcome back. When we start exploring GitHub Copilot, what I want you to keep in mind is that this tool isn't just another coding assistant, but it really represents a shift in how you and I approach software development. My name is Peter Detender, a lead technical trainer here at Microsoft. In this module, I'll guide you through how Copilot fits into your day-to-day work as a developer or DevOps engineer. Really think of it as having that AI pair programmer who understands context, anticipates your next steps, and helps remove friction from the process of turning ideas into working code. My goal is to help you see not just what the tool does, but why it matters for your productivity, problem solving, and even your creativity. As you know by now, I always start with an overview of what the module covers. In this one, I want to set the foundation for how GitHub Copilot suggestions actually work behind the scenes. When you write code, or even when you simply describe what you're trying to achieve, Copilot analyzes your context, the file you're in, the broader project structure, patterns in your repository, and even comments that outline your intent. From all this, it offers suggestions that can be small, can be incremental, or surprisingly substantial. The key idea is that GitHub Copilot accelerates the parts of your development that typically involve repetitive typing or searching for examples, letting you stay focused on the logic and the architecture. And then you'll also hear me emphasize the different ways you can interact with Copilot. So whether you're accepting inline suggestions, prompting it directly on the chat, or triggering comments that ask for explanation, or creating unit tests, each interaction helps you build a more natural workflow. And then I'll also explain the different subscription options, not to sell them to you, but to help you understand which version best fits your organization's needs and governance requirements. And then finally, we'll talk about configuration and troubleshooting, because Copilot effectively means knowing how to tune it to your comfort level and your coding style. So with that, let's talk about Copilot being that AI peer programmer, which I like to call my peer developer buddy, as it is really where things start to get fun. In your editor, Copilot acts very much like a thoughtful teammate. It reads the code you already written, it interprets errors, and responds with explanations or providing suggestions that guide you towards solutions. Or when you're stuck or maybe experimenting with a new API, it can break down error messages or even offering examples that help you reason through the problem without losing momentum. One specific powerful aspect is GitHub Copilot's ability to generate unit tests and propose bug fixing. When you give it the right prompt, it can analyze your code for edge cases or give you opportunities to harden the implementation. The main goal here is for Copilot to replace testing or debugging, but rather to enhance those practices and then help you maintain higher quality code with less manual effort. Throughout the session, I'll demonstrate obviously how these capabilities show up naturally as you work and how you can use them to reinforce good engineering habits. Now, before all that, let me start by sharing some of the most common and impactful use cases of generative AI throughout your development cycle. These scenarios go beyond autocomplete, and they get into how exactly AI can support deeper parts of your workflow. From learning a new programming language, creating documentation, to orchestrating multi-step workflows. And you'll see that Copilot doesn't just speed things up. It really reduces context switching by letting you stay in your editor instead of bouncing between browsers, documentation sites, or internal wikis. Another big benefit is that GitHub Copilot can take over those repetitive or boring tasks as part of your development, such as generating boilerplate code, scaffolding projects, or drafting initial versions of documentation. And then there's obviously also way more advanced uses, like accelerating pull request workflows by becoming a reviewer or designing story-driven development tasks. All these are areas where Copilot can help developers like yourself maintain creativity, having clarity, while also automating steps that traditionally require a lot of manual work. And as we go through this slide here, imagine where these use cases fit into your daily workflow and where they could remove friction or frustration. So here we're moving a little bit more into the practical ways you interact with GitHub Copilot throughout your development process. So when you're working in line with code, suggestions appear naturally while you're typing, and you can choose to accept, ignore, or ask to refine them. This keeps you in that state of flow, especially when you already know what you intend to build and you just need a little bit of help expressing it efficiently using code syntax. Beyond inline suggestions, GitHub Copilot leverages the comment palette as well as Copilot chat panel on the side as the interface I personally use most for all my AI interactions these days. The comment palette gives you quick access to actions like asking Copilot to explain code or generate tests. Meanwhile, the chat interface lets you have more natural conversations, allowing you to ask questions, exploring alternatives, or even troubleshooting issues without ever needing to leave your environment. And then finally, we'll look at how writing descriptive comments can guide Copilot to produce surprisingly accurate code on your behalf. That's where that line between an assistant and that peer programmer is really becoming fuzzy. Before we jump into demos, it's important to understand the setup and configuration process. You start with activating Copilot for your account through enabling the license. Now remember, you have Copilot Free Plan, which can be used with a personal account, or you need to choose from several paid plans as an organizational user. From there, you install the appropriate extensions for your preferred development environment. So whether you work in VS Code, Visual Studio, JetBrains, NeoVim, or Xcode, GitHub Copilot integrates natively and follows a similar setup pattern. And you'll see how straightforward it is to get started. Basically means you sign in, you enable the extension, and you confirm a few settings. And if you watched the GitHub Codespaces module earlier, good news is that GitHub Copilot is also embedded there if obviously you do have that license. Once Copilot is installed, configuring it becomes part of your regular workflow. You can adjust how frequently suggestions appear, enable, maybe disable certain behaviors, and then choose how much context Copilot uses. For organizations with more sensitive code bases, I'll also touch a little bit on governance considerations. Why? Because I want you to walk away confident, not just in using GitHub Copilot, but also in managing it in a way that it aligns with your team's development practices as well as organizational security requirements. That's pretty much it, what I wanted to talk about through the presentation. But I would rather spend a little bit more time than enough, to actually go through the demo. It's great to hear about its features, but I think it feels even more powerful when I can really show you GitHub Copilot in action. So in this demo, I'll guide you through the full experience from enabling Copilot and then using it for AI-influenced or AI-powered development inside Visual Studio Code. You'll see step by step how to activate your plan install the extension, and then verify that everything is connected correctly. And then when all that is done, I'll demonstrate how Copilot responds to natural prompts, how it suggests codes in line, and how you can refine its output to better match your coding style. One of the highlights we'll explore a little bit more towards the end of the demo is Copilot Agent Mode. It's that more conversational but also goal-driven way of interacting with GitHub Copilot. That's what we call Agentic AI. Instead of asking for a single suggestion, you can work with the agent to perform multiple step tasks or even explore different approaches to a problem. This gives you that sense of how generative AI can support more advanced workflows, not just individual lines of code. And then by the end of the demo, you should feel comfortable experimenting with GitHub Copilot on your own projects and then experimenting how it adapts to your work. So in this demo, I'm really excited to talk about GitHub Copilot. And in a previous demo, if you watched that module on code spaces, I mentioned that code spaces is one of my favorite features in GitHub, but that might have been a little bit of a lie, although I still like code spaces a lot. But GitHub Copilot is just so amazing. And I guess it's a tool that I've been using for about a year, almost every single day, multiple times a day. And I'm going to try and keep it to foundation level, just giving you a bit of that inspiration, getting you excited about looking into it more. So the starting point is obviously validating the license. Know that you do have the GitHub Copilot free license, but you cannot use that against your enterprise environment. But if you have like a personal GitHub account, you can start exploring a lot of what I'm showing you in the demo, pretty much everything I'm going to show you in the demo using the free edition. And then obviously once you start using it a lot more, that's where the subscription model would be a lot more beneficial because it gives you a lot more features. So the starting point is, again, starting on the GitHub website where you navigate to your account, and down here you go to Copilot settings. The short link to do that is github.com/Copilot. And from there, it's going to show you a lot of the specific settings, obviously for your account, and now specifically for Copilot. So you can define where in your GitHub product world can you use it. So we have Copilot in development environment. I'll show you the integration with VS Code. You can do Copilot command line. I'll show you that for a couple of seconds as well. You can integrate in GitHub Mobile that I showed you in another demo. So like again, it's GitHub Copilot is available all over the place. And the reasoning behind that is obviously that as a developer, DevOps engineer, you're so dynamic, you're so flexible, and we try to bring in that Copilot experience in all those environments. That's step number one. Step number two is where you're going to define the plan. So in this case, again, I'm linked to obviously our Microsoft backend, but in your case, it would be the free edition, the pro edition, or the full-blown paid version. You can use a lot of different options, and this is where, again, if this is your enterprise plan, then some of those settings might be controlled by your organization, but I get access to different large language models, like really bringing in that generative AI aspect. But maybe you are limited or blocked from using certain large language models because of security compliance, maybe just out of a preference for a certain model that what could be the influencer there. So assume from here, we have our Copilot license, we enabled it, it's ready to use, and that means we can move to the next step. The first example is still happening in my GitHub environment, where I'm going to use this little icon here, and that's really calling out, hey, GitHub Copilot, I want to use you. It brings me to a chat interface. If you've done anything with Microsoft Copilot or M365 Copilot, it looks kind of identical. If you do something with ChatGPT or any other generative AI tool, it's basically giving you that exact same experience. Well, now we can start using it in a couple of different ways. Out of the presentation I mentioned, you can use it to ask questions, get documentation for your repo, maybe interact with information that the large language model got trained on. So I could ask questions pretty high level, not specific to any of my repos, any of my environment settings. Can you describe forking and branching? Keeping it a little bit in like the DevOps and GitHub scenario where now it's giving me an answer. So I'm using the prompting, and this is an easy example. There's a lot more on what the industry calls prompt engineering, right? Where the best practice is try to be as specific as possible. The more information you provide in your question, in your prompt, typically the more accurate the response will be. Now, depending on your license and the plans you have, you can choose different large language models. I got access to a lot of them, and the explanation here is that you might need to switch across different language models depending on the tasks you're performing. Some language models might be better in providing documentation, might be better in writing code, maybe better in writing code in a certain language framework than others. And the recommendation here is if you do have access to multiple plans, then nothing wrong with switching back and forth. Gonna take it to another little example. I'm gonna take a step back and I'm gonna connect it to my repositories. I used my demo cats for a lot of my other examples, and you can see here that we're using this search option. Now, quite important, I mean, people apparently love demo cats because a lot of them do have demo cat repos. Want to make sure that I'm using my own example, so I need to make sure I'm adding my account name into it. Now, what I'm doing here is scoping Copilot like, hey, whatever I'm going to ask you, you can now look into the project. So from here, I could now literally ask a question. What is this project about? It's not going to provide a lot of details because we don't have a lot of code, but I hope at least it's going to come back telling me that it's repo that's having HTML, there's a README file, and it's probably covering something with cats and whatnot. So that's what you see here, and it's somehow trying to provide technical-oriented feedback. So it's going to tell me there is no description, bad points for Peter. About 75% of the code is HTML, that one little index HTML file, and about 25% is the CSS, and there's also a README file. But now I could still ask, can you help me updating the index HTML with an image placeholder? Well, now it's getting through the question, it's going to interpret the question and then providing some feedback. Again, my prompt was pretty high level, not super specific. And what it's now coming back with is if you want to use this placeholder, well, maybe you can use this default approach for injecting image placeholders in a web page, and it's going to ask a confirmation. So it's like, would you like me to make this change? So now we're shifting from like ask mode into actually trusting GitHub Copilot to take actions for you. So I could do like, sure, go ahead. Well, now it's going to look into the actual code and rewriting my code files. And I'm keeping this super high level, not super complex, but just know out of the power of the large language model, it can rewrite easy HTML all the way to creating full applications. And I actually might be able to bring in a little example of that. So now it's going to pull up my existing index HTML. It's still respecting source control, so removed some lines and then adding some lines and then closing my HTML page. Well, now I could go like, sure, I'm going to allow you to make changes. So this is where you are still in control. You could use it to just have sample code, but not applying the changes and so on and so on. This is all happening in the browser, but wouldn't it be cool if we could actually do this from within our development environment? You know that for all my demos, I've been using VS Code, but it's technically the same if you use Visual Studio, IntelliJ, Eclipse, and any other supported development environment. I'm switching to more, I would say, more complete project. And again, I don't want to spend a lot of time on going through all the examples because I'm reusing a lot of this in another GH-300 GitHub Copilot, more deep dive, more in-depth course. But just want to highlight a few things. So this is another example. It's no longer my super easy demo cats, and I'm going to try and start my application. So it's a .NET example, and I'm going to navigate to my source folder location, and I'm going to run .NET build to just validate if my code is actually compiling correctly. And then I'm going to do .NET run. And since my compile build stage worked fine, I hope that the running will actually work as well. Looks pretty good. I'm going to open it on my local machine, and I'm using our Contoso framework here to show you like a healthcare application. It's showing me doctor information. I have patient's information, and then typically, because patient's information needs to be a little bit more privacy locked down, I could now log on with a user account. And if I don't have the correct credentials, then it's not working. So again, pretty lightweight example, but it's a full-blown application. Now imagine that I want to make changes. So we navigate back to VS Code. I'm going to stop my app, and I want to add some changes to it. But this could be the first example where I'm going to open up Copilot. So what you need to do here is installing the Copilot extension. And then from there, it's allowing you to just open it, close it. You can switch language models down here, similar to what I showed you in the browser. You have your chat history. So these is some examples from the last couple of days, just prepping, building a little sample app. And it allows you to switch back and forth. So like 2 days ago, I was like, well, maybe I want to integrate some Playwright, like a unit testing framework. And I'm just asking Copilot, can you help me with Playwright? Maybe it's too new for me because I'm a trainer, I'm not a developer, right? And that's where I can benefit from all that assistance. I can start a new chat conversation, and I'm going to try and make this a little bit bigger. There we go. Doing about the same as what I did in the browser mode. I'm going to ask a question. Can you describe this project? But now I told you earlier that the power is in the prompting. So I could ask, generate an executive summary followed by a more technical, audience targeted documentation covering the following. I want details on the development framework. I want information on the database engine being used. And I want information about the actual web pages architecture, and so much more, right? So from here, it's thinking about my prompt. It's going to analyze it. That's what the large language model is doing. And then from there, it's going to look into the code base, and it's going to provide me documentation feedback. I'm going to give it a couple of seconds. So the first part in the process is thinking about the prompt, which means I'm going to analyze your code base. And it's not just looking in one single file, but it's literally inspecting my full project. And then from here, it's nicely providing me a response to my prompt. Next to that, it's respecting my prompt logic. I asked for executive summary, and it's providing a high-level description. And next to that, I asked for more technical details, starting with development framework, obviously targeting DevOps teams, developer teams. A little bit further down, asked for additional information. What's the database engine like? and then eventually talking about a lot of answer components here, the full page structure with all details, and then it's even trying to explain and clarify my actual code. From here, we can move into, for example, code updating, where I'm inside my code file, my little homepage for my application. And imagine here I want to make some changes. I'm inside my code. I can do Control-I on Windows in VS Code, but maybe it's different shortcut keyboard keys on a different platform. But now I could ask to, for example, rewrite this to show the blue color. Well, now it's recognizing the specifics of my selection, and it's going to provide suggestions as what we call inline code generation. I can still switch my my large language models, and eventually it's going to come back. There we go. So now it's looking into my selection and rewriting, and then as you can see, source control is still valid, but that's not Copilot, and it's moving the dark red color into blue. Now from here, it's all interactive, you driving, you controlling, you running prompts and asking. But we can make this a lot more powerful by switching from ask mode into agent mode. What agent mode is going to do is taking control of a lot of actions. Now you are still in the driver's seat. You still need to confirm if it really wants to change anything. Now, if we think back about the app, we had a patient file, we had the doctor page. So imagine in my healthcare scenario that I want to add like information about medication. So I'm going to move back to the prompt and I'll just clear everything that we had before. I'm going to switch to agent mode. And now I'm going to ask, respecting the current setup of my project and the framework, can you do the necessary to add medication page to the website? You can again add some sample data. Because obviously this is in the development environment, we're not using production details. And from here, it's basically waiting, just allowing it to go through, and then probably it's going to ask you to validate, it's going to run some command line. So I'll be quiet for a little bit, and every now and then I'll just call out some of the actions that it's taking. So in this final summary slide, I'll bring together the key lessons from the module. So by now, you've learned not only what GitHub Copilot can do, but how to use it effectively in your real engineering tasks. You should feel confident enabling Copilot, configuring it to match your environment, and then using it to generate or explain code inside VS Code and all the other supported editors. More importantly, you've seen how GitHub Copilot can support you in writing better code, but also faster, especially when you approach it with clear prompts and that sense of what you already want to achieve. As you move forward, I encourage you to think about where GitHub Copilot fits into your daily routines. Whether you're drafting new features, maintaining older code, or exploring new frameworks, it can act as a partner that helps you stay focused and productive. The real key is to treat Copilot as that collaborator, one that accelerates your workflow while still leaving you in complete control of your engineering decisions. And by the way, if you want to learn even more about GitHub Copilot, I would recommend you to check out ak.ms/GH-900 on YouTube. To wrap things up, I want to thank you once more for joining me in this module. My goal was to help you understand not just the mechanics of GitHub Copilot, but really that mindset and getting habits that allow you to use it effectively. Because as developers and DevOps engineers, your work is constantly evolving, and tools like GitHub Copilot give you new ways to experiment, to learn, and deliver value faster. As you continue your journey, I hope you'll take what you learned today and then apply it to your own projects. Try out new prompts, explore different workflows, and keep that open mind towards how generative AI can support your craft. The more you interact with GitHub Copilot, the more naturally it becomes part of your development rhythm. And I'm excited for you to experience that firsthand. If you followed the whole series, this was the last video in the GitHub Foundations collection. You learned pretty much everything there is to know to start using GitHub and its many features with confidence. As you probably know by now, this is not the end of your learning journey. While this series is done, there's a way more to explore on ak.ms/learn. Thank you so much and have a nice day. And I'll see you next time.